chance to get your banjo questions answered. Tony says, all good. So Tony can hear me now too. I love it. Nothing like some good old fashioned technical issues to get us started. Wouldn't be wouldn't be a regular weekly session without him. Bill says, tell us about Puerto Rico. Um, it's I love going to Puerto Rico. We know a few folks who live there, which got us starting to go visit not too long ago, about 4 years ago, and we went there a few years back with a few of Kelly's siblings, a few of her many siblings. Had a great time. Decided to make it an annual trip, and then COVID swept in and thwarted the last 2 years. And we still had deposits down on a vacation rental, so we're heading out there this week for that very rental we locked down 2 or 3 years ago. So we're getting back out there. Should be great. Should be a nice break. So with that in mind, I'm sending out emails this week, so you all will see that we're not going to do a lesson or the Ask Me Anything next week. Taking an actual vacation, I'll probably answer some emails because I'm always checking in to make sure nobody's having any emergencies with their accounts or anything. But for the most part, I'm going to take an actual about 8 to 10 day vacay. And I've already been digging into some Puerto Rican cuatro music. I don't know if y'all are familiar. I'll take this down for now. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Puerto Rican cuatro. It's a really interesting folk instrument that the mountain farmers traditionally, the Ibaro of Puerto Rico, are what's known as. I've heard it translated. I believe the Smithsonian translates Ibaro as hillbilly, and it's the as far as I understand, the Ibaro folks are the farmers who live in the inland mountains traditionally in Puerto Rico, and do some mountain farming. It's always fascinating to watch people farm steep rocky hillsides. Uh, but there's a big tradition there, and obviously it's heavily influenced by the Spanish colonization. And so the instrument, the cuatro, it's very similar. It's a lute style instrument. It's similar to a lot of other instruments, but it looks like a big violin shaped guitar, basically. With the modern version has 10 strings, but it's chorused strings, so it's like a mandolin or a 12 string guitar, right? So it's a 10 string, but you think of it as five choruses, right? So pretty interesting. Check out the cuatro, just how it's spelled, the number four. So traditionally, the cuatros had 4 strings or 4 choruses, and the modern version has five to add an extra bass note on the bottom. It's all tuned in fourths. So um, the last couple times I've been in Puerto Rico, I was interested in kind of seeking out some cuatros and maybe some cuatro players and makers, and I hadn't got around to it. Spent too much time visiting and hanging out in the ocean, I guess. So this time I'm going to try to do a little exploration. Might meet up with a luthier or a player or two, and see what happens. I've been talking to a couple people online, and might take a little adventure. I'll try to take y'all with me. If I do, I'll try to capture some footage or some photos, and maybe I'll bring back a cuatro. Who knows? I do see some questions rolling in. I love it. I've got a couple questions backed up too, so this is good. We're going to have plenty to talk about. That's my Puerto Rico update for now. I thought about trying to transcribe one of those tunes for our lesson this week, a Puerto Rican Ibaro tune, but we'll maybe do that next time. Bill had a question. Curious why you went to that tuning with Capo 3 on Black Muddy River. Let's start there. I'm going to answer your questions that you have here in the chat. Also, folks on YouTube, I'm talking to the members right now, but folks on YouTube, you can chat there too. And I already have a question in there, so this is good. We're going to have a bunch of questions. So keep your questions rolling, and I will get to them as best I can. We'll start with curious why you went with that tuning with the capo on 3 for Black Muddy River. Good question, and it's a question I would love to answer over and over. And I kind of walked through it in part 1 of the because I did 2 sessions with Black Muddy River, and the first one I just took you along with me while I listened. I picked the studio recording of the Dead doing it. I listened, I figured out what key it was in, then I tried to figure out a tuning that would work, kind of figured out the melody or the chord progression. Then I made sure I knew the chord progression numerically and not just key specifically, because they were in the key of A. So I figured out that chord progression, figured out what that really was fundamentally beneath the key of A, just how the 1, 4s, 5s, and all that worked. Then I started looking for a key that would work for my vocals. So that's why I ended up on the 3rd fret in the double C tuning. So the double C tuning kind of came because, well, first, before the tuning was even a thing, I said, okay, A is cool. That's where they're playing it. I've got all the info I need. Now I'm going to find something that works for my vocal range. Most of us are not blessed with a super dynamic vocal range. I have a pretty small range, and you know, you can obviously train yourself to expand that, but you know, some folks are just kind of naturally have a little more longitude to work with when they're singing. Others of us have to just kind of find, and even wonderful, super talented singers, we all find a key that maybe optimizes, you know, our vocal strengths for any song. So I could play a song like Black Muddy River in A. I'm in a weird tuning, but I was in a weird tuning and down a whole step. Now I'm probably more or less in open G tuning, more or less standard tuning. So I could do Black Muddy River in A. When the last rose of summer pricks my finger, and the hot sun chills me to the bone. Just wasn't a great key for me to sing it in, so I started searching around for other keys, and that's what I recommend you do anytime you learn a song. Start looking for different, cycle through different keys and see what matches your vocal range the best, or just your vocal stylings, right? So I ended up, even in that first video, kind of figuring out, oh, I'm probably going to end up about an E flat. So that is what led me to going to a double C tuning, which it turned out the melody laid out nice and logically in that tuning. And that was a good fortuitous situation for me, because I thought I can just take the key of C and the double C tuning and just capo it up to E flat, and there it matches my vocal range a little better. I didn't overly think that and spend too much time with it. I was doing this mostly for exploration and learning purposes and sharing purposes. So there might be a more optimal key for me to sing that in, but that worked out pretty well, and I gauged that pretty well. It's going to be somewhere around E flat where I would end up as an optimal key. So that's why I went with the capo on the 3rd fret. Anytime I'm capoing up, unless I'm just emulating somebody I'm learning from and trying to make it correlate with something for the sake of teaching, anytime I'm capoing, it's generally to accommodate my vocals. If I'm just doing a solo banjo and singing, using the capos to accommodate the vocals and get it in the key I want. Okay, one question down. Let's see, this may be a comment. I don't know. We'll get to the end. We'll find out if there's a question. Beep says, Ryan, we explored Lena Hughes and her playing. Lena Hughes is an amazing Missouri multi-instrumentalist, but around here really well known for her banjo accompaniment for old time, among other musical accomplishments. There's a great Tompkins Square album of her fingerstyle playing. Anyway, we explored Lena Hughes and her playing. I found Etta Baker this week, whose guitar playing is as wonderful as Lena's. Pretty similar too, I'd say. I understand she also played banjo, but have yet to find recordings. Have you heard of her? Do you know about her banjo style? And then he said he sent a link on email of her playing. And also, good morning. Good morning to you too, Beebs. Um, I should say, Beebs, some of our newer members I've noticed are all fellow educators. We have a lot of educators here in the end up here and play Better Banjo, keeping me honest. Beebs being an educator man himself. Yeah, so I'm familiar with Etta. I never, not overly familiar with her, but I definitely know what her style's about as far as her recorded stuff. Um, there's stuff out there of her playing banjo for sure. You can find some online, and I don't know what if you do, digital streaming music services, you should be able to find her. I know on Apple Music there's a collection of her doing guitar and banjo. One thing I could be wrong about, but that I think I know about Etta Baker is I don't think she really sang. At least the recordings that I've spent a little time with were just instrumental. And Lena Hughes would be the same way if you listen to her finger picking album or you hear her playing banjo. She's accompanying other fiddlers usually. So pretty interesting. There are some similarities there. I know Taj Mahal is a fan of Etta Baker. I know he hung out with her a little bit and was a proponent of her playing. So that's a good ringing endorsement. So yeah, there's some banjo stuff out there. Do you know about her banjo style? I don't, but let's check out her banjo style. I'm gonna go onto the World Wide Web, onto YouTube, and we're gonna go Etta Baker banjo, and let's see what happens. I'm guessing we'll get an instrumental banjo. This is the album I was thinking of right here. Does she sing on these? She must. I might have really lied to you. Oh, somebody's got her playing. That's probably a homespun video there of her actually playing. Okay, let's see. Oh, we need volume. Maybe I wasn't wrong. I don't hear any singing on this. So these are a lot of songs that you're used to hearing vocals on that as far as I know, she just played instrumentally on these. Let's listen to this style for a second and see. This is Going Down the Road Feeling Bad, so it's probably an open G tuning. Let's see if we're actually in G. That's pretty good recording there. The guitar's a little heavy in the mix, so let's see if we can get some better intelligence here off of some other recordings. I'm sticking with YouTube here. Looks like, oh, here we go. Here's her playing live. So, Cripple Creek.
One of the highlights of this weekend for me is
mostly. You can see all the other folks up there on stage with her who are probably all well-known musicians. You see them all staring at her while she plays because they're also trying to figure out what she's doing, right? Everybody wants to know. So what I think I'm seeing there, and it sounds like I'm kind of hearing, is a two-finger style. Sounds like it. And one thing, if you back up, if I back up here, this right here looks like it's actually Etta playing on this, what I assume is probably a homespun instructional video from back in the day. Let's go back to the melody. Yeah, it's, look at that right hand. I think she was a right-handed player. The picking hand, two fingers, right? She's using her thumb and index. Really cool vibe you get from that two-finger style on guitar. So my guess is same style on the banjo, and that's what it looks like too when we look at this here video. Get about right there. See where it is. Started out the session in a very weird tuning, so I'll probably be tuning a lot. So the first thing I'm hearing, I'm hearing a bing digga digga digga. I'm hearing a lot of G notes on the high G and also on the first string. I heard some subsequent pinching in there. So all I'm doing is just kind of listening, really intuitively, kind of grabbing the general approach. So what I'm hearing in her general approach is on this, there seems to be some finger lead style. So she's playing index and thumb. I'm always more comfortable with middle and thumb. But finger thumb, right? And it seems like a finger lead style, at least on this Cripple Creek that she's doing. Yeah, it sounds like a finger lead, two finger style. I'd have to give it a little more time. Maybe we'll do that in the near future. I might stick with this for a second, though. Well, while we're here, we're going to slow it down. So it seems to me, I'd say my preliminary conclusions are we're looking at it's a two-finger style. Looks like some thumb and some finger lead, so kind of switching back and forth is my preliminary conclusion. I could spend, a good 30, 40 minutes with this and get a much better answer for you, Beeps. But that's kind of fun and worth exploring. If we have time at the end of this session, I think I'll just jump back here. But I think a lot of the answers would probably be in finding, when you explore the stuff on your own, find the resources that'll give you the visual clues you need and some other stuff. So I could find, instead of a blurry video of her playing the banjo, I could go back to this guitar video that y'all can't see yet, but and so there, right, in this particular example, she's playing alternate thumb, kind of typical finger picking guitar style, alternate thumb, with the fingers playing the upbeats and the melody upbeat notes. The banjo sounded like it might have been a slightly different approach, but worth checking out. I'm curious what other resources are out there about her banjo playing too. Now that we're deep in, I'm gonna grab some other. Here's a Etta Baker finger style, same thing maybe. Oh yeah, I've got the wrong. I'm logged in the wrong way. Getting some ads here. Here we got a little note. If you listen to Etta Baker's music, you'll notice a constant alternating bass line and a snappy, bright picked melody. He's talking about guitar, of course, but again, talking about that alternating bass, kind of a classic finger picking guitar approach in the country folk world. Yeah, so a little micro Etta Baker exploration there. Pretty cool. Like I said, we'll get back to that if we have time later. Let me see if we got some more questions. We have one in the YouTube chat. By the way, folks, this is Ask Me Anything, so get in there if you got some questions you want answered or anything banjo-ish related. We'll get to talking about it. Have you ever played an Appalachian dulcimer? Yes, I certainly have. I've owned a few. I believe I own one now, although obviously I haven't played it much lately. Yeah, I believe I have one down in my pile of instruments downstairs. Yeah, I've played a little bit of Appalachian dulcimer. I'm by no means any kind of expert on it, but when I was a teenager and just kind of in my early days of playing this kind of music with some friends of mine, we ended up in a band in a trio configuration with a feller by the name of Jack Geiger, wonderful dulcimer player and builder. I saw Jack a few years ago down in Mountain View, Arkansas, where he lives now. And he really opened our eyes to the mountain dulcimer. We were well aware of it and had both owned one. And a lot of times with the mountain dulcimer, it's tuned D-A-D is pretty standard tuning. And then you'll have a chorused D on top. So just a double 2 D strings that just match like a mandolin style. So you just have like the 1 and the 5 of your D, right? And then most folks would just fret that single chorused string and then strum the others for harmony. So it would be like see if I can emulate it. Kind of using my fingers to fret and mute certain strings to try to emulate that 3-string sound of a open dulcimer. So it's pretty simple and friendly to play if you play it in that kind of traditional style where you just fret the 1 string. A lot of people use a little dowel to fret that 1 string as well. And similar to like a harmonica or a concertina, where it limits the amount of notes, a traditional Appalachian dulcimer, the way you see them these days, you pretty much just have your diatonic notes on there with maybe a flatted seventh note added in. So it's really similar to like a harmonica, where if you just kind of get rolling, you can intuitively get some good harmonic sounds coming out of it. So it's a great instrument to learn on and just to pick up and have a little fun with. It's probably a great one to have for kids, I think. And then people like Jack Geiger and a ton of other folks out there will take that instrument way beyond what you see most people do. And you'll see folks playing jazz and complicated stuff on those things, and flamenco. There was a fellow that I met when I was younger named Alfonso. I can't remember his last name, but he was very, very good dulcimer player, and he could play flamenco and jazz and pop tunes on that thing. So, yeah, I'm familiar with Appalachian dulcimer. Good source. Check out Gene Ritchie if you're looking to check out some classic Appalachian dulcimer. Rabbit hole. Start with Gene Ritchie maybe and see where you end up. See where the internet takes you. But yeah, I'm a fan of all things folky and dulcimers. No exception. I don't, personally, I don't pick one up very often. I find them not as versatile, but as other instruments. So there's fewer times when I pick them up, but they're just really cool, and I like all instruments. We started out today talking about how I might pick up a cuatro, a Puerto Rican cuatro here next week. So we'll see what happens. But I like to add different flavors to the mix. Speaking of, so here's another good point to make, jumping off from that question about Appalachian dulcimer. Yes, I have one. I have a concertina. I have multiple banjos of different configurations. I have tenor banjos. I have a makeshift plectrum banjo. I have 3 5-string banjos. I have steel string. I have nylgut. I have fiddles, mandolins, acoustic guitars. Don't currently have any electrics. Why am I telling you this? I have a piano out in the living room. There is so much to learn by trying to transfer any knowledge you have from one instrument to another. So, for instance, say you start on the mountain dulcimer and then later you decide to pick up a banjo. There's so many parallels there that some of them you're going to pick up right away. You're going to make the connection right away. Others you'll discover as you go. But I think it's so good for the conceptual part of your musical brain to actually explore different modes. So from time to time you'll hear me recommending, like, hey, put your banjo down and pick up an instrument you don't know very well, or maybe at all, and try to see what you can do with this musical knowledge that you're used to applying on one single mode using one single mechanism, like for instance a 5-string banjo. See what happens if can I take any of that sound and play it on a keyboard? I don't know. Can I play it on a concertina or a penny whistle? I like all instruments pretty much. Right? Just like to mess around with them. And I think it's really helpful for the musical brain to just kind of try to experiment and try to explore with different instruments. You don't have to master any of them. You don't have to have any grand aspirations, but one thing it does is it frees you up to be a little more playful and experimental. Once you start learning a little bit on an instrument, you start to get a little serious about it. I'm getting pretty good on the banjo. I need to focus and build up my skills. Well, that's great. That's a great attitude, but let's make sure there's still play in there. We play these instruments, right? We don't want to just work these instruments. We want to play them. We use the verb play when we're talking about music. So there's a lot of work and study involved if you want to kind of open up the possibilities and make the play more dynamic. But ultimately, we're playing around, right? There's no better word for it. We're playing. So make sure that you're getting enough play in your musical study, and a lot of times a great way to do that is to pick up another instrument, a harmonica. As I just mentioned, harmonicas are also very friendly for just kind of intuitive musical noodling. All right. There we go. Another little mini lecture from Ryan. I recorded a lesson earlier today. There's a bunch of mini lectures in there for the members, folks in the members area. You'll see that tomorrow if you're watching this in real time. We're all in the same spot here in the space-time continuum. All right, a few more comments and questions. What are your go-to tricks or methods for improvising? Can you talk about doing it in G and double C and tips for up the neck? That's a lot there, Rick, but yeah, I'll talk about as much of that as I can. So I started to learn, and then Gora says, I started to learn climber banjo for a while, but now I notice the pain in my hand is sort of brushing the palm of my hand is brushing the head. Any tips on how to prevent that? I'm going to answer these questions in reverse. So, Gora, the palm of your hand brushing the head. I assume you're talking about up here. This kind of thing. Tips for preventing that. I don't know if you'll find this satisfying or not, but my tip would be I wouldn't try too hard to prevent it. I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's very interesting. I find it interesting over the years, the different ways that people perceive the percussive part of playing a climber banjo, especially in the beginning. You might find, you're putting a lot of effort and thought into all this coordination. You might get a lot of banging and clanging, usually with that palm right there, or the thumb. It's usually kind of the thumb, and the palm is probably what you're talking about there. You can get a lot of banging and slapping. And some people are concerned that it's bad technique and it's a problem. It's not. If you don't mind how it sounds, there's no problem with slapping that head. Other folks ask me the question from the other angle. They say, hey, how do I get all that percussion going? I hear people playing percussion when they play climber on the head. And most people aren't actually intentionally doing that. It's just kind of happening, right? Like it's happening to you. Just kind of slapping the head. So some folks actually like that. And I do find that most folks in the early stages, there's a lot more slapping and pop clapping on the head unintentionally. It usually kind of cleans up as you go, and then you can decide later, and I'm guessing that's kind of your motivation here, is you want to say, how can I stop unintentionally slapping my palm on the head of the banjo? And then later, if you do want that sound at any time, you should just be able to do it. Again, I don't think it's so bad unless it's really distracting. If it's a heavy issue, if it's distracting you physically or it's distracting you sonically, or if you think it's not a good experience for the listener, then yeah, you're going to want to work with that. All I would recommend, I guess, technically, is you can create some angle here in your wrist. Now, I play in a pretty flat style. It almost looks like I'm hyperextended sometimes when you watch the videos. I'm really not, but sometimes I do have a pretty flat angle to how my wrist is, right? You see a lot of players play with much more of an angle here. So I would say if you're worried about this slapping, this would be my advice to try out, see if it works. Imagine there's a little puppet string connected to you right here. You don't want to put a bunch of tension in there to crick that up. Just imagine that there's a little puppet string there and just pick up that wrist from that angle. That's going to clear the palm a little bit. So when I do that, you notice right when I start playing, I kind of even out because that's just where I naturally play more of a flatter angle. But when I started out by kind of doing this little this kind of little exercise mentally, physically, I picked up that wrist and then I started playing. Well, now what I had done is I kind of repositioned my arm a little bit, not on purpose, just kind of picking up the imaginary puppet string, kind of repositioned me. So then even when I did straighten back out, I'm still up a little more than I normally would be. So look for adjustments you can make. You can make some minor adjustments here where what part of your forearm is resting on the head. Little angles here. People get really concerned about proper technique. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get a good claw hammer sound, and that goes for most techniques, really. You got to watch out for techniques that are going to be uh, maybe cause injury, but you kind of know when those are happening because you feel excess tension and inability to usually make much noise. So I would trust your body a little bit, experiment a little bit, and just simply lift that palm up and experiment with some technique approaches where you're not so hard on the head. If you do find you have kind of something like a hyperextended situation here, which you might if you're getting a lot of slapping, that's probably not good. There's a lot of tension there. We get a lot more tension here than we do here, because here we can relax everything and get this kind of angle. Here we're tensing everything, most everything, from here to here. So that's usually not good. It's not going to create fluidity in our playing. It's going to create undue tension here, which will cause various problems. So that would be my advice. Hopefully those little bits of advice will be helpful. And yes, I got a confirmation. That's exactly what you were talking about. That little slap, slap, slap. Yeah, some people love that sound too. So let's delve into Rick's question. I love it. Like I said, there's a lot there, but I explore these all the time in the members areas, as a lot of you know. And sometimes we might be on a session where we're focusing on something else, but we'll still get into a little bit of these improvisational ideas. So let's see if in the next 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes, let's see if I can summarize my approach. Gora saying thanks for the tips. I do like the percussion, but it was more the brushing I found a bit too much. I'll go and try some stuff around. Yeah, dude, just experiment and just come back and ask some questions if you continue to have them. And I think we'll get you where you need to be. So back to Rick's question: what are your go-to tricks or methods for improvising? Can you talk about doing it in G and double C? Tips for up the neck. Let's see if I can summarize this. I have done it in a lot of different lessons. Let's pull up a whiteboard. We gotta have a whiteboard for this kind of stuff. At least to help you kind of understand what in the world I'm talking about, because I'll probably throw a lot of terms out at you. If some of it's over your head or just moving too fast, you can always go back, skip to this part of the video, archive, slow me down if you need to. Most people need to speed me up, but sometimes you gotta slow me down. Let's get rid of my howdy guy over here as well. Clean palette. Let's go big. Question: what are your go-to tricks and methods for improvising? Here's the first tip I always give people for improvising is, and it annoys people sometimes. I used to give this in my folk school classrooms a bit. People would get annoyed, but they'd come around. So tip number 1 is don't improvise, memorize. So this is not a long-term strategy, but this is a great place to start, because when we're improvising, one thing to understand is, yes, we are creating spontaneously, right? And there's a lot that goes into that, a lot of knowledge and a lot of training of the body and the mind that goes into being able to improvise in a high level. But nothing that we're doing is truly, I should say, most of what we're doing is not truly just inspired decision making. It's all built on repetition and reusable patterns, and we're using techniques and licks and all this, which is what you're asking about. So step 1 for improvising is improvise or work up a solo for a couple tunes or songs that you already know. So I don't know what context you're interested in improvising. To me, I think you should always be able to improvise in any musical context. So whether you're adding variations and embellishments to a fiddle tune, or whether you're taking a blues solo or a solo, you're jamming with a rock band or whatever, it shouldn't matter. If you understand all of the elements that go into improvising, you should be able to survive in most of those situations and maybe even get some good results. Okay, that's a long way to get to point number 1. Play the actual melody. So this takes premeditation for most people. So let's say we're playing Worried Man Blues. This is what I used to use in my classes a lot when we talk about this. We're playing Worried Man Blues in the key of G. Takes worried man to sing a worried song. Takes a worried man to sing a worried song. Takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried now. Take it away, Ryan. Worried man to sing a worried song. Close. I got most of the notes in there. See what I was doing there? I was just playing the melody as best I could. So, step number 1 for improvisation, just play the melody. Most of us can't just grab any old melody on the fly by ear and intuition and experience. You'll get there or you get close. But maybe you start and you don't even, you just prepare. Maybe you know you're going to a jam or where you kind of know where some of the songs are going to be, or you know you're playing with certain people and you have a set repertoire. Just learn the melody as best you can, and even if you're not doing a right hand technique. Now, why do I tell you that? Well, one, it's going to sound good to anybody, whether it's the other musicians you're playing with or just people listening. They're going to hear that and go, yes, that's what's supposed to be happening. They know what they're doing because I can hear the melody in there that they've been singing. Now it's happening on the banjo. Great. Success. Yes, it's not technically improvising if you've premeditated it, but that's where I say to start with improvisation, because it's going to get you really familiar with where these melodies are lying on your fretboard in these different tunings. You asked about the open G tuning and you asked about the double C tuning. Well, there's going to be some common notes that you're going to come across over and over and over, common patterns on the instrument in those various tunings. And the more melodies you learn, just straight melodies in those tunings, the more you kind of get a feel and a visualization of where those groups of notes are and kind of how they function within various chord progressions and stuff like that. A lot of that can be intuitive if you just learn a lot of melodies. So a lot of folks have had a lot of success just learning melodies. And then when it comes time to improvise, they try to just copy and paste. It's not a terrible approach. Take little pieces of the melodies you've already learned and see if you can just kind of throw them onto a song in the same key. So step 1, just learn some melodies, especially like if you know you're going to improvise on these 3 songs next week: Worried Man Blues, Cripple Creek, and Crawdad Song. Then learn the melody, just the melody line, and start there. And what you'll find is the other thing, the reason I make people do this in our classroom settings is then once it's time to play your pre-made melody, most of us kind of fall apart at some point. So you might start and think, I'm not even improvising, but I'm going to play Worried Man Blues. Then you kind of forget where it is, but you kind of know the notes are here. Next thing you know, you are improvising, because once you're in real time trying to play a premeditated thing, if that's not solidly locked in, or you get distracted or whatever, all of a sudden you're no longer on course, and now you're improvising. So I think working with a pre-made melody is the best way to get into improvising. It kind of gives you a clear picture of what you're going to be working around, gives you a place to start, and then once you start losing your way, it kind of gives you a map that you can try to get back to. Next step is, I told you, you learn all those melodies, you start seeing these recurring patterns in your tuning. So with those patterns of safe notes, I call them, the really common notes you'll see among all your melodies and stuff, they tend to just be pentatonic scales, and whether you're familiar with those or not, quick, rapid fire music theory lesson here. I do this all the time. I make people watch this. We go through the whole thing. What's a pentatonic scale? Well, find a major scale, which we build with our Roman numerals, and then I always write it out this way. You write out the half step intervals in between each degree of the scale, right? And let's say key of G, then you kind of go through that process, and we follow these half steps: 2 half steps, 2 half steps, 1 half step, etc. And that tells us where the sharps and flats, all our accidentals are in our scale. So the key of G, G major, we end up with G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. A pentatonic scale, if you want to derive it just from a major scale, a major pentatonic scale, we just go 1, 2, 3. We skip the 4, 5, 6, and we skip the 7. There are other ways to derive the notes of these scales, but I like to think of it from the major scale point of view. So now a G major pentatonic would just be those 5 notes. Now, if you look for those on your fretboard, if you've played in G enough, most of us have played in open G quite a bit. Let me extend this. So we'll say our notes are D, G, B, D, right? So we have an open D, that's part of the scale. We have an E note right here, that's part of the scale. Open G will work. And A is in there. B is in there, so we can play our open second string. Our open D works. Our open E works there. We could go all the way up here to our 5th fret on the 1st string for a G. There we go. We have a pentatonic scale pattern, my friends. Now, notice I could have grabbed the D note right here, but we already have it on the open. Oh, I should have written that up here. There we go. So, look at these notes that we just mapped out. We've got a pattern of notes. And the interesting thing is, if we want to start, like if we want to figure out where our root note is, like we're doing a G major pentatonic, so here's our root note. That is filled in a little green, right? That G. And then also up here is a root note. That's another G. So that pattern there, let's take a look at that. You can find these, like I said, just by learning melodies and paying attention to where the common notes are. But if you analyze it, you can get rid of those trickier notes a little quicker. So now I have open, second, open, second, open, open, second, 5th. And if I know those are some safe notes in the key of G, and I know that my open G, my 3rd string, is a root note, and I know my 5th fret up here is a root note, I'm well along my way to play some improvised music in G. I need to know where those root notes are for the key, and I need to know what safe notes are there. So I could do the same in double C. I would do it for the key of C. I tend to on the banjo, if I'm not playing all over the place out of the standard open G tuning, then I'll use tuning per key, like double C I'll just use for the key of C. An open G tuning, I like to use it for the key of G obviously, but also I'll do a lot of closed movable shapes. But for the quick tips and tricks, let's find let's say key of G, let's just say bluegrass, play along track. So I'm back on the internets here. Bluegrass play along track, 100 beats per minute, key of G.
At Asana, we know people work in all sorts of different ways. So
I actually have an ad-free account on YouTube, but not my Play Better Banjo account, so I'm going to turn this ad down. Unless y'all are interested in Asana for your work. Okay. Oh, more ads. Let's change my account. Hopefully this doesn't kick us off of YouTube. Hopefully you're all still out there. Got my ad-free account. Okay. Oh, got it slowed down. Let's get it back up to speed. Watch this. I'm getting a little better tune with I was a little. I'm still a little out, but let's see if we can get closer. Okay, now I'm in a little better tuning. All G pentatonic. So hopefully you can hear how just those open pentatonic notes, those safe notes in the key of G work. That's not a great jam track there. Sorry, fella who put that up there. Let's find something that's a little more standard, kind of bluegrassy. That did not strike me as such. We'll try this one. Bluegrass backing tracks. This one says key of A. Let's just roll with it. But you should be able to use just those notes. Just capoing up my safe notes, my G major pentatonic notes here. So, see how those notes, just those pentatonic notes will work, even though I couldn't tell exactly what the progression was going on there, but I could anticipate some of those 1, 4, and 5 notes. So that's a good tip there. Just kind of learn melodies first, pay attention to the common notes in those melodies, then try to use those common note patterns, whether you analyze them intellectually and theoretically or not, and then start using those. Just use them as single notes at first, like I was just doing, and then you can start integrating them into your picking style. If you're a 2 or 3 finger player, work it into your rolls and picking patterns. If you're a climber player, work it into your boom chicka strum. Then the next step on my quick, not so quick tips here. Next step is then I like to go up and do a full octave, second octave, just up the first string. So in this case, I'm in open G, tuned up to A. We did that kind of octave there. We ended up on a root note. So we have our that extends that scale. So once you're good in the open position with whatever safe scale collection of notes you're using, then you can extend that scale. Next step is to make sure I know the chords I'm playing over, make sure I do know the chord progression, make sure I know the chords, and find movable chords and partial versions of those chords. So I could take something like this track here, make sure I know the chord progression. Then when they're playing a root chord or like a G chord, I could find that chord in various places up and down my neck, just play a little piece of it. You know, I could find a G chord right here. Just play these 2 notes. Oh, they went to the 4 chord, the C chord. So I'll just play a little piece of that chord. So you can play chordally or you can play by scale. Ultimately, you mix all those up and you throw a few little other spices and seasonings in there as well. But those are the 2 main modes I think about, is playing by chord, playing with a chordal approach or playing with a scalar approach. Start the scalar approach just by learning some melodies and finding some common safe notes there. Hopefully we're still streaming. I changed accounts there. Yeah, we're still good. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Rick. And I think that's going to wrap it up for today. We went got about our normal hour in there. Thank you all for joining me. And another bonus one for the YouTubers out there who aren't inside the members area. We'll let another one go out to the public. This will be it for our regular weekly ones inside the members area, folks. We're going to, I'll just be doing some pre-recorded question answering once a week along with the weekly lesson. And then we'll do 1 to 2 live question sessions like this, or live sessions anyhow. But they'll be fairly sporadic, so at least 1 a month, and then oftentimes we'll probably get 2 in there. They'll be during the week, and I'll give you a heads up if you're in the members area, and we'll keep exploring together. So thanks for joining me, folks. Hopefully some of this info helped, and I'll